Isaac Newton. It was just a year after the death of Galileo that an infant came into the world who was christened Isaac Newton. Even the great fame of Galileo himself must be relegated to a second place in comparison with that of the philosopher who first expounded the true theory of the universe. Isaac Newton was born on the 25th of December, Old Style, 1642 at Woolsthorpe in Lincolnshire, about half a mile from Colsterworth and 8 miles south of Grantham. His father, Mr. Isaac Newton, had died a few months after his marriage to Harriet Ayscough, the daughter of Mr. James Ayscough of Market Overton in Rutlandshire. The little Isaac was at first so excessively frail and weakly that his life was despaired of. The watchful mother, however, tended her delicate child with such success that he seemed to have thriven better than might have been expected from the circumstances of his infancy, and he ultimately acquired a frame strong enough to outlast the ordinary span of human life. For 3 years they continued to live at Woolsthorpe, the widow's means of livelihood being supplemented by the income from another small estate at Sowstern in a neighbouring part of Leicestershire. In 1645, Mrs. Newton took as a second husband the Reverend Barnabas Smith, and on moving to her new home, about a mile from Woolsthorpe, she entrusted little Isaac to her mother, Mrs. Ayscough. In due time we find that the boy was sent to the public school at Grantham, the name of the master being Stokes. For the purpose of being near his work, the embryo philosopher was boarded at the house of Mr. Clark, an apothecary at Grantham. We learn from Newton himself that at first he had a very low place in the class lists of the school, and was by no means one of the model school boys who find favour in the eyes of the schoolmaster by attention to Latin grammar. Isaac's first incentive to diligent study seems to have been derived from the circumstances that he was severely kicked by one of the boys who was above him in the class. This indignity had the effect of stimulating young Newton's activity to such an extent that he not only attained the desired object of passing over the head of the boy who had maltreated him, but continued to rise until he became the head of the school. The play hours of the great philosopher were devoted to pursuits very different from those of most schoolboys. His chief amusement was found in making mechanical toys and various ingenious contrivances. He watched day by day with great interest the workmen engaged in constructing a windmill in the neighbourhood of the school, the result of which was that the boy made a working model of the windmill and of its machinery, which seems to have been much admired as indicating his aptitude for mechanics. We are told that Isaac also indulged in somewhat higher flights of mechanical enterprise. He constructed a carriage, the wheels of which were to be driven by the hands of the occupant, while the first philosophical instrument he made was a clock, which was actuated by water. He also devoted much attention to the construction of paper kites, and his skill in this respect was highly appreciated by his schoolfellows. Like a true philosopher, even at this stage, he experimented on the best methods of attaching the string and on the proportions which the tail ought to have. He also made lanterns of paper to provide himself with light as he walked to school in the dark winter mornings. The only love affair in Newton's life appears to have commenced while he was still of tender years. The incidents are thus described in Brewster's Life of Newton, a work to which I am much indebted in this chapter. In the house where he lodged, there were some female inmates, in whose company appears to have taken much pleasure. One of these, a Miss Story, sister to Dr. Story, a physician at Buckminster, near Colsterworth, was 2 or 3 years younger than Newton. And to great personal attractions, she seems to have added more than the usual allotment of female talent. The society of this young lady and her companions was always preferred to that of his own schoolfellows, and it was one of his most agreeable occupations to construct for them little tables and cupboards and other utensils for holding their dolls and their trinkets. He had lived nearly 6 years in the same house with Miss Story, and there is reason to believe that their youthful friendship gradually rose to a higher passion. But the smallness of her portion and the inadequacy of his own fortune appear to have prevented the consummation of their happiness. Miss Story was afterwards twice married, and under the name of Mrs. Vincent, Dr. Stuckley visited her at Grantham in 1727, at the age of 82, and obtained from her many particulars respecting the early history of our author. Newton's esteem for her continued unabated during his life. He regularly visited her when he went to Lincolnshire, and never failed to relieve her from little pecuniary difficulties which seemed to have beset her family. The schoolboy at Grantham was only 14 years of age when his mother became a widow for the second time. She then returned to the old family home at Woolsthorpe, bringing with her the 3 children of her second marriage. Her means appear to have been somewhat scanty, and it was consequently thought necessary to recall Isaac from the school. His recently born industry had been such that he had already made good progress in his studies, and his mother hoped that he would now lay aside his books and those silent meditations to which, even at this early age, he had become addicted. It was expected that, instead of such pursuits, which were deemed quite useless, the boy would enter busily into the duties of the farm and details of a country life. But before long it became manifest that the study of nature and the pursuit of knowledge had such a fascination for the youth that he could give little attention to aught else. It was plain that he would make but an indifferent farmer.